Welcome to this Web Extra with Democratic presidential candidate Julian Castro. There are some issues I bring up with all of the candidates. They're not always as big on the campaign trail. Let's talk some foreign policy. How do you approach foreign policy specifically, I guess, when it comes to U.S. involvement in the Middle East, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria? Do we have a role to stay there? Have we, because we broke it, did we buy it specifically in Afghanistan and Iraq?
I think that most people recognize that it's time for us to withdraw from those places. Now, what I believe is that, and Iraq is a good example of this, that we have to be very, very careful and thoughtful before we ever get into a military conflict. First of all, Congress needs to do its job and be the one to either authorize or not authorize the use of military force.
But hasn't Congress sort of abdicated that responsibility over the years? Decades now, really.
Well, I think it has. Yeah, I think it has, but I don't think it should. And
it's hard to get it back once you give it up, though.
But there are those in Congress that have been working to try and ensure that there's a UMF, authorization of use of military force, each time there's a potential military conflict. So there are those voices. But what I would say is we have to be thoughtful going in, and military conflict should always be a last resort. We also have to be very thoughtful as we withdraw to not create more instability. And my problem with the way the president has approached this is that he suddenly announces over Twitter, without consulting with our allies, without informing military personnel, that we're going to be withdrawing. You know, that is not the way to do things. And so even though I agree that we need to withdraw, I disagree with the haphazard, erratic way that this president is doing it, just like the way that he's engaged in this haphazard, erratic trade war with China that is hurting a lot of farmers in Iowa. That's a common refrain in this administration. It's that he can't control himself. He can't put together the team or the plan to actually be successful. I would.
What do you think can be done to find a peaceful solution to the Israeli and Palestinian conflict? This has been a problem since I was a child, and certainly before that. How do you address that? Democratic and Republican administrations have all failed and have all promised to solve it.
Well, I mean, what I can say is that I want to go back to a time where we're trying to work in earnest as a broker of peace over there with a full court press to create it. I think Secretary Kerry was doing that. You may remember that he spent a lot of time when he was Secretary of State shuttling back and forth and trying to achieve a peace. My concern is that it doesn't seem like the Netanyahu administration is making the right moves to be able to lay the foundation for a two-state solution over there. I consider Israel a strong ally. Israel and the United States are friends. We need to remain strong friends. At the same time, as a friend, I also want to ensure that they're doing what they can to promote a two-state solution and promote peace.
But hasn't every time the Palestinians have been offered that olive branch, they haven't really necessarily accepted, and they still vow, whether or not they have it in writing or not, specifically Hamas is still all in favor of the destruction of Israel, and they control Gaza. So how do you address that with Iran specifically funding Hezbollah and Hamas?
No, well, look, I agree that, and that's why I think the United States needs to dedicate a lot more time and do it in a disciplined way. That's not what we've seen with this administration. With this administration, they keep promising that there's going to be some sort of peace plan or approach. They didn't consult the Palestinians apparently when, as they've come up with that. They also have decided to move the embassy, without going, I think, through the steps of understanding what role that's going to play in us achieving the greater goal, which is a two-state solution and ultimate peace for the long term. So, of course, there's a long history there, and Israel is our friend, and we're going to support Israel. However, if we're serious about peace, it's going to take a different approach from what this president is doing.